let me ask you this, because I learned about you through this article.
The
Houston area,
Chronicle.
yeah, the Houston area school district uh, ramps marketing up and hires firms to win back students. And now I hate. We don't market. We're not a marketing company. I hate the term marketing company, right? I don't think you recruit any students by marketing. That's some good reputation building. But you had said something that I think is profound, but schools don't know, or they've been really slow to, which is you go, the monopoly's gone. And my premise, Doc, is the monopoly ended 10 years ago. But why are schools just now starting to realize that the monopoly's gone?
That's a good question. I think some schools have known about that for a while in places that are have a lot of competition, and some schools, some districts still don't have competition, or their only competition is an online school. And that's really only for some families. You look at rural districts, for example, most districts in Texas are rural. They're small, but numerically, there's a lot of districts. And they don't have any competition because there's just not a lot of kids to support different options except that. So I think that's why some schools are coming to the game late, because they haven't had a lot of competition, and
Yeah,
that's changed pretty
but
quickly.
I think you're. That's been my experience also, especially the rural and suburban districts. Suburban districts are now starting to
Yeah.
get hit in the last couple of years, but even with the big districts, I'm talking about the big ones that have had competition for 15 years, and we mean,
Mm,
any kind of competition, the money follows the student. So at least
right.
public schools goes to other place. But I'm still amazed by the fact that they don't want to leave the past. And your
Yeah,
background in, educating leaders. I mean, that's your PhD, for goodness, right?
it is.
Is
It
why are
is.
the leaders so slow to to accept the fact that monopoly's over and they need to compete?
So I think maybe there's a couple parts to that question. One is we don't educate them on that. We don't talk about how do you address competition? How do you think about yourself in a market? So I think that's part of it. And they came up as teachers, probably in an environment where there was less competition. And then I would say part of it is maybe it's hard to balance all the competing priorities. And this is just another competing priority. It's an existential one, but in a similar way that accountability can be an existential one. So I think it's also just, it doesn't, it's almost like it's, you don't realize that it's come for you until it's come for you and your school is suddenly on the chopping block, or is in the news because maybe in 5 years it'll be on the chopping block. I think that there's an attentional issue in addition to a we don't even know how to think about it issue, because we never had to, or we never thought we had to think about it.
That is okay. So you reminded me of something. I think it was 8 or 9 years ago when we've been in the recruiting students game for public schools for a few
Hmm.
years, and we've been doing it for about 11 or 12 years now. And we got asked to teach how to recruit. And I was
Yeah.
like, oh yeah, I was all for it back then. I was like, yeah. And we went to different states and we were teaching teachers and principals
Yeah.
on how to recruit a student, like be salespeople. And it, I'm an old soldier, I'm an old military guy. And I was like, oh my God, they have a gazillion priorities, a gazillion that are mandated by state and federal and school boards and teachers and students and parents. And I'm giving them another thing. And the word priority means one, right? That
Right.
like priority is not supposed to be plural. It's priority. There's no such thing.
Right.
And I was like, they're not going to do any of this. And they didn't. And
Mm,
because their job was to teach or to
yeah.
principal. And you're right. That can, how can we expect them to do everything well?
Yeah. Well, we do that, right? We expect teachers and schools to be social workers and to be teachers and to be leaders and to be sort of sometimes surrogate family members and to be counselors and to help them get into college and to help them get jobs. And it's just a lot. And then on top of that, now we're saying, and you're losing students, you need to go out and stop the bleeding. And what does that mean?
Yeah.
Right.
I
I
mean,
think
I'm
if you
sorry.
think about it as like go out and knock on people's doors and get to know your families, I think teachers know how to do that.
And they're,
But the
they're the best
sales
ones for that.
part's different.
Yeah, they're the best ones for that. And I was talking about before we got on was I'm giving a speech on the use of AI. And my whole
Mm,
premise is you can't use AI to build
right.
trust. You can't
Right.
do it. You can use it as a tool, but you've got to go out there and shake their hands
Yeah.
and say hello and I love you and I want you back and all these things.
Yeah.
But you're right. That is their job. That is a principal's job and teacher's job to, I think, to invite them to stay and invite them back. And
Right.
they can't just get hyper focused. But we, how do we, how do we get the leadership to understand that it's okay to compete? It's okay to literally compete and to talk about how great they are. Because I still get resistance about that.
Mm,
We don't want to get anyone mad at us. We don't want the parents to yell at us because we sent them emails and text messages and asked them to come to our school. And I'm like, it's America. This is well,
right.
it's America. It's America. And in America, we like competition, and it's not the
Right.
school's fault that competition's here, but getting them over that hump that it's okay to say, look at us. What do we need to do about that?
Oh gosh, I don't know if that's a really tough question. I think
Yeah,
I
Doc, that's why I've
remember,
got you here.
yeah, I know, but I remember having arguments when I was in grad school about, is there an educational marketplace? And I think it's almost like two mentalities, right? Two ways of thinking about schools. Is schooling a public good or is it a private good? And if it's a public good, then it feels very strange to talk about competition because we think we should give everybody sort of, this equal product or as close to equal, which we don't, right, in practice. But in theory, everybody should kind of get the same thing. And this notion that we compete and we specialize and it feels anathema to we're providing the best opportunity and education to every kid. Whereas if you recognize, look, you may not like it, but even before there were charter schools and before there was vouchers, there you could always just pick up and move, right? A family with the means, whatever those are, financial or otherwise, could just pick up and move. And so it's always been a market. And so we've just been lying to ourselves for 200 years or whatever that this wasn't a market. And but they're two different perspectives. And I think that most people who come into education, particularly with the goal of going into communities that are less advantaged and serving in those communities and sort of paying it forward and doing for the next generation of kids what some teacher did for them, the thought of competition feels almost like corrupting. And it feels contradictory to the purpose of public education. I think it's a hard mentality change.
Yeah, and I love this term educational marketplace.
Mm,
That term has not occurred to me, and I wrote it down because it is a marketplace, and I don't think it should be. By the way, I think it should be a public good. We ought to pour into it. We ought to try to provide as many resources and benefits as we can to. I mean, I had a lot of issues as a young child, and the public schools helped me with like speech impediments, um,
yeah.
and undiagnosed ADHD and all that other stuff. Wild kid.
Right.
I need to
Right.
be paddled. I mean, I did. It,
Energetic young boy.
yeah, I guess, and we didn't have a lot of means, and we were in those subsidized housing and everything like this. We didn't have an opportunity to move, but the public schools helped me, and but it shouldn't be a marketplace, but it is.
Mm,
And
yeah.
and the one thing that I've been kind of preaching on is I'm going to take your term educational marketplace for the future, which is
Please do. It's not mine. Please,
yeah, yeah,
please use it.
yeah, is no, I'm going to give you credit from now on is it's like I give analogy of like a restaurant. You've got a restaurant on Main Street. You've got this little place that serves a great breakfast. It's got 5 items on it because that's all you're allowed to have is the 5 items. That's what you get paid to sell. Think standardized testing, graduation rates, things like that, right? That's what you get paid to sell. And then 4 other restaurants open up on Main Street.
Yeah.
And you don't want to change your menu. You're not allowed to. You think you can't. You can't even put a sign in your door that says open because you don't want to come on too strong.
Mm,
Meanwhile, all your users, all your customers are leaving even though you have a really great breakfast, it's great, it's sound, it's good, but you don't tell anybody about it. And I can't even get them to, not all of them. I mean, more people are getting the game, but it hurts my heart for people to say, well, that's not our job. I know it shouldn't be your job, but the government, the federal government and the state governments have made it your job now. And I just don't know how to get that across to them in a way that connects.
I mean, I think I would just use different language because I think everyone's on board with we want our families to come back and we want our families to stay. And so I think if it's phrased as outreach and then, opening the school up to the community, the number of students I work with who love, the amazing things they do on their campuses to bring the community in. And they do it for many reasons. They do it to create a community. They do it to serve basic needs. So for example, they'll have, like a fair where people can sell, it's not a fair, but a Saturday, open up the parking lot and people can do like a garage sale, and they have stuff for little kids because people have, they have little siblings, or the high school kids may have kids themselves. And then they bring in the dentist and they bring in the doctor and they bring in different services. And so they check a lot of boxes when they do that. And at the end of the day, that's what that is it's community engagement. You could think of that as customer engagement. And you could do that beyond your school community. And I think the thing that's sort of ironic is that it's like people's representatives. Everybody hates Congress, but everybody likes their representative because they have a relationship. They know the issues. They show up. Maybe that's eroding and I'm seeing that through rose-colored glasses. But if you ask people about education, they'll say public schools are terrible, but I love my public school. Why is that? It's because, as you said earlier, it's not because they are good at AI. It's because they have a relationship. It's because the parents go to campus to, for a bake sale or to see the assembly or, to have the yard sale. So that building on what they already do, and talking about outreach of bringing the school instead of just bringing the community to the school, bringing the school to the community, because that's how you find the families who have left or who haven't made a decision yet.
Or have never come to public school to begin with.
Exactly.
Yeah, they started off in an alternative school and they've never got to. But I love, I told you, man, I'm an old soldier and then a litigator. I was a lawyer for a while, right? So I'm competition, winning. And you're right. I think you're right. And I wrote this down. So I think this is our first pro tip for people is you're not competing, you're doing community building.
Yeah.
And it's the same thing. It's really, from a tactical standpoint, you're talking about the same things, but maybe it comes off a little less aggressive. And I have on occasion been accused of being too aggressive. And so I like that community building and outreach, and once again, we have this issue of priorities, right? How much time is every student that leaves, they have less resources to do community building. And so let's assume for a minute, the district's a good average school district, not bad, not great. They got a bunch of schools in there, everyone's a little different. What would you say is one pro tip for each school just to do one thing to start building a community? Just one thing in addition to what they're doing now.
So I think a lot of schools are good at trying to bring parents into the building. I don't think they're necessarily successful at it. And so I think it's how can you find one community event where your school can show up at? And let me give you an example. When we first moved to Houston, we lived in a little townhouse, and the school that we were zoned to, my son was a baby, so we weren't even really thinking about it at the time. But the school that we were zoned to was essentially an overflow school for the district. When another school was too full, they would bus kids to this school because not enough people in the neighborhood had school-age kids at all, or that they were willing to send to the school. And every year we did, I think this is it's a national thing, hence the name, National Night Out, which I think often happens in the summer, but it's too hot in Houston to do it in the summer. So they would do it in October when it's still too hot. And, the police would show up and shake people's hands, and restaurants would set up a booth, and the school set up a booth. And the principal was there, and the assistant principal, and some families were there, and they would just talk to people. They had information about the school, they had pictures, they had, come see our garden. And I never would have learned anything about the school except from they kept showing up every year. I don't know what it cost them. Maybe it had a cost. Maybe it didn't. I doubt it was high, but just something like that. What's one thing where you can take the school out into the community?
So I love that. And I think that we found that also to be very effective, right? I mean, we always try to get people to go do tours. And I love tours that are like you have a student ambassador that helps with it, so you get that personal connection from a student's behavior. I love that. But you're right. Getting people to leave work and do that during the school day and all these things, it's really, really tough, right?
Yeah.
And at that point, I think that the parents have kind of made a decision to go anyway. But how do you get the ones that haven't made a decision yet and going to them? We go to libraries. We even go to homeless shelters and try to let them know it's cool to go to school. But let's talk about leadership, since you are the expert in that with education space. Is we have seen this, and I can't say we've seen this in Texas, by the way, but we've seen this in other states. So you might not be as aware of this, but we get resistance to the principals and the leadership spending their off-duty time doing these kind of fairs. And typically the district administration's left to do that. So the administration will have a comms team and they'll show up, but they're talking about the district in general, not the individual school. And that's just not as special.
It's not.
So do you feel when you're teaching young aspiring leaders, University of Houston, do you get a resistance? I mean, I don't get paid to do that.
Well, there's a lot. I think being a principal is, leading your school and other duties assigned, right? So I think that's part of the challenge is that, let's say you're at a high school, you're spending the whole weekend as an administrator, maybe Thursday through Saturday at your school, monitoring the track meet, the football game, the volleyball game, the tutorials. So I think that's part of it is, where do you draw the line as a leader when you have these duties? And then you may also have a family, which I very much sympathize with.
Heavens to Betsy. We let our teachers and principals have a family outside of being educators. Heavens to Betsy, we allow that, right? Yes,
so I think I think part of the challenge is, how do you juggle all the responsibilities? And Friday Night Lights in Houston is there in Texas is a real thing, right? The football game and the community. And the benefit of that to the community is the whole community shows up. And so that's almost like an outreach event in and of itself and should be treated that way. But I think it has to, I think districts need to support campuses to be creative around where can you show up? And it doesn't have to be every weekend. Maybe it's twice a semester. And maybe it's also knowing when our applications for other schools due. So for example, I live in Houston ISD, and Houston, their applications for the internal choice program are in let's say November. So then in September and October, that's when you need to be doing community outreach events. But I think that I think you're right that districts shouldn't be doing them, that campuses should be doing them, but districts can support campuses. In the very least, if they can't give them resources, at the very least, they can say, we found 3 options for you to take your school and go to this soccer game, or go to, a soccer tournament or a football tournament, or to go, there's some other event happening in your neighborhood and you need to have a booth. We've paid for you to have a booth, or we'll help you set up a booth. So I think campuses often, again, principals are sort of treading water and focusing on the biggest threat and biggest worry, which is learning, right? Accountability, right? I know you've talked about that before in your podcast. It's a big shadow.
I just keep going back to this I think we're asking too much, too many diverse things. And any great person that's been a great leader, a great accomplished something has been very singularly focused, right? The word, once again, the word priority is one. In Latin, there's no such thing as plural priorities. It's impossible. Priority literally means one, right? But we give them all these priorities. And there was a study that came out, and you can correct me if I'm not remembering it quite right, but it came out and it said since the 1970s, and this was probably around 2000 study came out. It said we've increased staff and support staff and administrative staff by 57%, but the student count's only gone up 10% and nothing's gotten any better.
Right.
And I was like, well, that's because in that 50 years time span, you've had all these rules and regulations
Right.
that now they have to fill out paperwork most of the day in triplicate, and they have to, I'll say it, they have to teach to the test because that's what they get rewarded for. They can't do anything innovative. So you have to hire all these support people just to fill out all the government paperwork, which is not teaching. It's not teaching anyone to fill out something in triplicate, right? And so we keep putting more and more demands on a limited group of people. And now we're shaving off the nurses, and we're shaving off the psychologists, and we're shaving off the therapists. Assistant teachers in Texas, I'm not sure what they call them, but I was at a board meeting. The assistant teachers to provide support don't even get paid that much. I mean, it's a very low hourly wage, and it's brutal. It's brutal. I couldn't believe it. And so we don't give them the resources, but now we want to add a whole nother community building block on there. Like, what can we advocate to cut off of their plate that you think that is just an unnecessary activity from them teaching the babies, I guess? What can we do to streamline things? I know that's a mouthful, right? I know.
I mean, it's how long do you have?
Yeah.
It's, I think you're right. We're very good at layering on new requirements, layering on new mandates. I remember when I worked for a session at the legislature in Austin, and anything that had a fiscal note, so anything that was going to cost any money, was almost, for the most part, was dead in the water, right? It was DOA, it was dead on arrival. And so then if you wanted to pass something, it had to have no fiscal note. And there would always be, annoyance about, well, you can't ask us to do more and it's not funded, it's another unfunded mandate. But that's really the only way things pass. So for example, I was just reading, Texas just passed a ban on cell phones in the classroom, which as a parent, I think is phenomenal. Go Texas. Other states are doing it too. It's not just a Texas thing, but it was passed without any resources for districts to do things like buy little pouches that you can lock them up. So we're good at doing that. And I don't, and it's interesting because so then you look at a charter school, where charter schools by definition, face a different regulatory scheme that is lighter. And yet I don't know that they necessarily do this prioritization any differently, because at the end of the day, they still face federal regulation, but they're all under the same accountability system.
Well,
Go ahead.
Are they? Our charter schools don't get graded. They don't.
Oh, yes, they do. In Texas, they do.
They don't have to have the same requirements for standardized tests, though.
Yes, in Texas, they do.
In Texas, charter schools have got to take the same standardized test as public.
Yeah, they all take the STAR.
And so they all get the same grade, because Texas has had grades forever, right?
Yeah, we've had different variations. The grading system don't quote me on it, but it's relatively new. But we had something else, other designations. But charter schools all take tests, and, people complain that they can, they don't get away, they don't get out of everything, right? They don't have to, like, they can hire uncertified teachers in ways that a traditional public school in theory can't. In Texas, there's little loopholes that traditional schools can take to ask for waivers to get out of some of these requirements. But I think if you're subject to accountability, then you are in some ways you still have your hands tied because you're, as you said, you're still teaching to the same test. And I think what you see, at least in Texas, is that in charter schools, their innovation is not around instruction. Their innovation might be around, oh, they're stricter, or they have this focus, like it's a, there's a network of charter schools based in the large cities in Texas that focuses on STEM primarily.
Yeah, and I definitely want to get to the products.
Yeah.
Today, I do want to get some advice from you on the STEM programs and stuff. But to go back, and I would say the accountability, at least in my opinion, I'd like to hear your thoughts on this, is try to close a public school. Just try it. Just try it. The public loses their minds. All right. And these are not even, in a lot of states, people that currently go to the school, but people that graduated from that high school or graduated from, they want their local school and they lose their minds. You can close a private school at drop of a hat. There's no public input on that. Charter schools close down all the time without any public input and consolidate. And they're like, if you want to go, you go. So they don't have to keep unproductive resources online because the public demands it. They can actually say, this is a better school. It's got better, equipment, better labs, and we're just going to move everybody over here. And if you want to come. If not, you go to your local public school and people will move. But a public school cannot close a public school down. I mean, it is a Herculean effort.
Yeah.
And so I think that the lack of a transparent board, where people can go in there and yell at their board members, right? They see them in the grocery store and they yell at them. And we're kind of going back to this outreach model, not competition model, outreach model, is we've had school boards that we've had to terminate our relationship with school boards, with clients, because they were like, we had these two parents call and complain and you need to shut everything down. And I'm like, they complain because we're trying to recruit them and they go to a private school and, well, they're not even your constituents. They're not even your users. They're not even your people. Some of them will be, and they don't want you to compete. And so they shut everything down, right? Because they get yelled at. Charter schools and private schools don't have that same kind of backlash.
The democratic accountability.
Yeah, the democratic accountability. Yeah.
So I mean, that's, you think about the root of the school board or sort of history, and it comes out of the progressive period where there was an attempt to get rid of all the what was happening in the, back room, that nobody with everyone smoking cigars and nobody knows how these decisions are made. And so if we bring it out into the light and it's all done democratically, then we'll get rid of a lot of the corruption. That's the theory. And I think I'm sure that in a lot of cases that's been true. And then it's also introduced new challenges, right? I mean, we're living through a very imperfect moment in our democratic history, but it is all a product of the challenges of democracy when you have people who don't agree. And I think in the case of the school board, you have so many, and then it depends what state you're in, right? Because in Texas, we don't have unions that have a lot of powers. We have unions, but they can't bargain collectively. Chicago, that's not the case, right? In New York City, that's not the case. And so a school board is responsible to not only the parents in the schools, but also to the voters who don't have to be parents or in the schools or kids who came through the schools, but it's their money that's going to fund it. And so that's probably when you get a private school parent who calls up and says, why are you spending money on X, Y, or Z? You should be spending it on A, B, or C. And if they are a well-connected enough parent or person, then a school board, rightly or wrongly, will listen to them. And that's just, I'm sure there are ways you could design a system that it would work differently, but at the end of the day, it's a challenge of how do you manage these competing stakeholder interests when everyone has an opportunity to to say their piece, and then the district has to figure out what do we do with these shouting people.
Yeah, well, it is interesting. Like, I know democracy is a flawed tool, but it's the best we've got.
Exactly, Churchill.
But the issue that I have is all the alternative schools where the money is flowing through vouchers or et cetera,
Right.
they're not democracies,
Yeah,
and people
that's
don't
true.
know. And your tax dollars, by the way, are still going there. I mean, if it
Yep.
goes to a voucher and the voucher then goes
Yep.
to the school, you are now still a taxpayer paying for a school that you don't understand and you don't know whether or not it's going to be any better. And then there's a complete lack of transparency.
Yeah.
And so I don't know what to tell leaders about that other than try to, try to make sure the state makes equal rules. Try to have them have a public board that has to
Yeah.
meet and have the parents come in or the taxpayers come in. I mean,
Yeah.
trust me, the private schools don't listen to taxpayers.
I think so. I think what they would argue, just to sort of play devil's advocate, is they would say that, and choice advocates would say this, is that when you have to compete for your students, you have faced sort of the ultimate accountability, because if they don't like, they chose to be there, and so if they don't like it, they'll leave, right? They'll vote with their feet. And I think that you could question that logic of how easy is it to move your kids out of a school, et cetera. And I think that there's truth to that as well. But I think that would be their argument: is we're democratic. We're not accountable to, you're right, we're not accountable to the taxpayer more broadly, but we're accountable to giving our community who's chosen to come here the best product we can. And because if they don't like it, they leave.
Yeah, something just popped in my head, and I've heard this argument that people vote with their taillights, right? And I think I'm going to, in some of my teaching of boards and education of boards, I'm like, okay, you're running for re-election, but I don't want you to send a mailer out. I don't want you to do a TV commercial. I don't want you to talk to a voter. I don't want you to do any outreach. And let's see who wins.
Yeah,
Let's see who wins.
exactly.
Now, that doesn't work the principals and teachers and all the staff that actually has to do the day-to-day ops, but that might connect, Elizabeth, with at least the board. Don't do anything, and let's see if you win. Because I've got to make
Right.
it
Right.
connect with them. And
Right.
I need some aha moments here. And then go, wait a minute. I'm not allowed to put out that I'm a good person and I've done a good
Yes.
job and I passed some good laws. No,
Yes.
no. You sit in the corner and be quiet, because the competitor, the person running against you that wants to have the voters make it just a choice. We just want to present a choice. That's all we want. That's what schools present a choice. But you're not allowed to give them any information to make a choice. Good
Right.
luck. Let's see how that works out for you.
Right.
And I know that we have I do feel bad for the leaders.
Oh, yeah.
I think they're overwhelmed
It's a
and
tough job.
overworked. Yeah, and they're getting less resources. So I don't know. I love this community building and outreach and them getting out and saying hi to people. And that's probably a really good start if they're not doing that currently. I did want to talk to you though about this, because rarely do I get an expert in STEM, right? And this is about, the product, right? And a lot of people will say to me, well, if they've got a better product, they're going to go there. Well, not if nobody knows about it.
Right.
Right. But what is it? And this came up a couple weeks ago with a school district. What's the difference between a good STEM program and kind of a facade STEM program?
That's a very good question. So I think a very good STEM program is going to do a couple things. It's going to offer STEM classes that are not offered at a non-STEM school. So those could be things like robotics, or an additional science class. It kind of depends a little bit what level you're talking about. My son went to a STEM elementary school, so they had they had an extra rotation of math, they had an extra rotation of robotics, they did a couple extra things. So that's one, is the classes you offer. Another thing is going to be potentially the teachers you hire. You should be hiring teachers who have more expertise in STEM. Maybe even for an elementary school, maybe you're still seeking out people who have a math major or who have, and aren't just somebody who, yes, I took my math ed courses, but otherwise I'm terrified of math, which is true for a lot of elementary school teachers. So that's another thing. And you're also, as a school, ideally going to provide them with additional training. And then the teaching that they're going to do is going to be more what we would call inquiry oriented. So you are teaching not just the facts, but you're letting students discover the facts and test their hypotheses through science and explore math by doing things and building things, and apply math and science through engineering. Let's build, a bridge and learn about when we use a certain shape, our bridges are going to be stronger, right? And what does that tell us about triangles? So that's another. So instruction. So you have different courses, you might have different teachers, you ideally have a different pedagogical approach, and then you are going to have after school activities that you would host or sponsor at your campus. And those could be anything from, again, like a robotics club, a Lego building, if it's an elementary school, Lego building club.
I
If
would
it's a
join
high,
that. I would join
yeah,
the Lego building club.
yeah.
Right. Yeah.
If it's a high school, maybe you bring in first robotics. You might have a partnership with a local university where they send in college students to do activities. But so you're trying to hit multiple bases. And so a STEM school that calls itself a STEM school but hasn't made progress on any or all of those is not really a STEM school, because they're not offering more than what a non-STEM school would offer.
Should every school have a STEM program in it?
I think so.
Well, I know it's kind of a simple. So. I know it's kind of a simple question, but it's rattled around in my head. I'm like, STEM seems like that's something that everybody needs: critical thinking,
yes.
math, science,
yes.
and all that stuff. Scientific method, I dig it. Big fan of the scientific method. But is it just a lack of resources that creates that, or a lack of will to create STEM programs across the board?
That's an interesting question. I definitely think resources matter, because if you want to have, let's say, a state-of-the-art science lab, that's expensive. And then to keep it stocked, that's also expensive. If you want to have a 3D printer, that costs money, and you have to keep it maintained, and you have to hire somebody who knows not only how to use it, but how to teach using it. So those are all resources. And those are finite, both in the sense that dollars are finite, and then it's hard to recruit teachers who can do that. There's pretty much across the country, there's a shortage of very good math and science teachers, and there's definitely a shortage of people who come from a career. For example, people who have been an engineer and now want to come teach. That's a small group of people. Yet, how powerful would that be to bring somebody in who has had a career, who understands the application of what the kids are doing, right? Because that's the teacher's worth. The question no teacher wants to hear is, why are we learning this? When will I ever have to use that? We'll bring an engineer and they can tell you why that math matters.
Does a person that's retired, I'm thinking about the baby boomers that are starting to get out of the workforce, do they have to become a certified teacher to go into a public school and do STEM?
So it depends on your state and district, because there's different laws, and districts can get waivers, particularly to bring in teachers who do, quote unquote CTE, so career and technical education, which might be like welding or something like that. And then there's alternative certifications. So universities, I was an alternatively certified teacher.
See what I mean with the bureaucracy, man?
Yes.
It's like we want good people to come teach, but we make them jump through 35 holes, to do it. And they're like, I'll just go play golf, man. I'd like to teach these kids. I'd like to do it. I'd like to be helpful. But it's like, I'm not going to fill out a mountain of paperwork to go do. I know we want them safe and we want them to be good, but better to have somebody teach it than no one teach it, I guess.
Yeah, it's a very hard question, and there's research sort of on different sides, right? There's research saying, look, when you raise the barrier to become a teacher, you're going to lose people who aren't willing to jump through the hoops or aren't able to, right? Because the hoops are not only high, but they're costly depending on the state. And so you could make this argument about multiple areas. You lose teachers of color, right? If we want to have more teachers in our schools who look like our students, and there's research that suggests that can be beneficial, then if you raise the barrier, that can make it harder for them to get in because it's costlier, you have to take more tests, et cetera. On the other hand, there's the point you're making. If you raise the barrier too high, then people who might change careers are like, nah, I'm not going to bother. On the other hand, if we lower the bar too much, then we let in people who maybe really shouldn't be there. And yes, they'll probably leave.
But you said earlier that the charter schools, private schools don't have to have certified teachers. So why is it okay for them not to have all these barriers, but for us.
Oh, I'm not staking out a position on that. It's
I
just a
know.
difference.
I was, just dropping a little hand grenade in
Yes.
the room,
Yes.
seeing who
Yeah.
wants to run,
Yeah.
and that's the thing. It's like we want problem solvers. I have yet to give any of my employees a standardized test, by the way. Never once
Good.
have I done it.
That's good.
I'm thinking about doing it just out of principle,
Just for fun.
but we need problem solvers. And that's what
Yeah.
like STEM does that. And we can recruit to STEM schools. And okay, so let's back up a little bit
Mhm.
because the leaders want to do something. The good ones they want to do outreach and they want to do community building. Maybe they're not ready to compete yet, but okay, that's a good start, right? Okay, so I got to keep my notes there, Doc.
That's fine.
But is there any? I'm trying to get my head around this. What if we had a STEM light program? Because it's not a true STEM. It doesn't have all those things that would be awesome that you suggested. But is it good to kind of start somewhere and say, okay, we're not going to have the 3D printer. We're not going to have the new lab, but we can start these things and say that we're STEM plus or STEM, another tactical name that we're heading in that right direction. Is there any reason to bother with that?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think I would just call that like school reform, right? Because I would start with hire good teachers, train them to do rigorous instruction. And we should be doing that in all schools. And so if all schools are aiming towards that, and let's say that because of the world we live in, there's more resources that people are willing to give to STEM, but that could then raise the bar across the school. If all we do is support our teachers, hire better teachers, support our teachers, and improve our instruction, man, we've done a lot.
You have, but I also have to sell the schools.
Yes.
Right. And the word STEM,
yes,
gets people excited. And
Absolutely.
I want to leverage that term, even though we got to be honest. We got to be, direct about what they have and what they have. So I can't call them STEM if it's not STEM, right? I can't say we're going to recruit you to the STEM program, but it's like STEM light or STEM.
Yeah.
I don't know a great term, but I think if they were doing things that were on their way to that would, school reform is a term that's been around for a couple hundred years.
Boring. It's not for the layperson.
And I don't think people rate it like, no, duh, you should have done that already. But STEM light, what does that mean?
Yeah. I mean, I think you would, again, depending on where you started, then it's, if you start with the instruction, then it becomes, we do hands-on learning at our school. So, okay, you don't call it STEM, but we do hands-on learning. We do project-based learning.
Oh, hands-on learning, project-based learning.
Right. Problem-based learning. And you can do that across the curriculum. That's not just a science and math thing. It's just that there's probably more science and math specialized curricula to support math and science because, again, that's where the money is.
Well, it is interesting because I bet a lot of schools are doing those things. Mm-hmm. They're just not telling anyone.
And they're not telling anyone.
It was funny. We were working with a school district. I think this was in New Jersey. And we did a survey. We did a poll for them of what do the people want? And they were already safe. They were already going to graduate successful kids, smart kids. And they go, why are we losing students? And because we're top tier and all these things, we just don't understand. Yeah, we have competition, but what's going on? And I go, all of your competition is leveraging the extracurricular activities. They are selling that. They're like, we have 183 extracurricular activities. We have this, we have this. But by the way, those are all the public schools' extracurricular activities. Those are the public schools that the charter schools and private schools were sending their students in. But they were putting out information telling the parents they had it. And the superintendent goes, but those are all ours. We allowed them to do it. Why aren't we talking about that? And I go, I don't know. Maybe you ought to talk about it. Maybe you ought to go and put that out there that you're doing these cool things. These great, you do have a great product. Yeah. And there's a little bit of a leadership of getting beat down a little bit. And that was kind of what we were talking about originally. And I know we can't get to everything today, but if you were going to give, let's say, kind of a final point on what would you tell leaders to do now that in the face of school choice, competition, improving STEM programs, I don't know, what do you kind of want to leave them with as some sort of, tip that they can start working on?
Yeah. So it's funny. I said this in the interview with the Chronicle, and this is not my line. This is actually something my mentor always used to say when I was at UT Austin. He would say, tell your story or someone else will. And so I think it's find ways, whatever it is, however that is, get into people's faces, get into their front yards, shake their hands and tell them about what it is that makes what you think your school makes, what makes your school special. If it's that everybody, if it feels like a family, well, then tell people that. People want to send their kid to a school. I'm getting all mixed up here. They want to send their kid to a school where they're going to feel like they're part of a family. They want to send their kids to a school where there's going to be after school activities because parents work. So tell people that. I would say maybe you have to do with your teachers an audit and sit down and say, this is a good things we do audit. What are all the good things we do? And then every day find a way to find one person and tell them about one good thing you do at your school.
I love that. I love this whole tell them something good you do, because we've gone to school districts together and they said, their chief of communications said, we don't have anything good. I go, you get 90,000 students.
Yeah.
Some of them are going to great universities. Some are going to great military. What are you talking about? You know, his teacher, what? And I think some of it's years of kind of getting beat up that they're not good enough. Years of your schools are failing. Years of we want better. And so it kind of drives down your motivation to go out there and advocate for yourself.
Well, it also, schools tend to be in a very reactive position because they have their long priorities list that should be just one, but it's multiple. And so when these changes start to pop up, these external change, whatever they are, whether it's, new law, competition, whatever, they have to react to it. And one of the things that they could be proactive about is telling their story. So that's why I think a lot of them are caught flat-footed, because they're like, I've never had to do this before. They always just came to me. It's like, well, okay, that's fine, but that's not the case anymore. And so now you have to go out and tell people all the good things that you're doing. It's like when you get in your car, you pick up your kid in the afternoon and you're like, how was your day? And they're like, fine. What did you do? Nothing. I don't remember. Right. So you have to ask a different question. So schools have to start asking a different question of themselves, because what did you do? How was your day? Doesn't get us the answer we want.
Yeah. So Doc, I'm gonna title this episode, Tell Your Story or Someone Else Will.
Good. But on the record, that's Jeff Wayman said that. Well, now, he's my mentor.
Jeff, your mentor, doesn't get full credit. That term has been around since Socrates, all right?
Well, he gets credit for me.
Well, then he gets credit for me too.
From him.
And he gets credit for me too. So where's he at right now?
He's still in Austin. No, I don't know where he works right now. He's does like data use and like helping public schools make the most of their data systems and the student and other kinds of data that they get, so that they are better aware of how their processes are working and then using those data to make better decisions.
Yeah. And we didn't even get to that today. Like your data use. I was real curious about that. We'll have to have you on again to talk about
anytime. This has been fun.